Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BYU Library Family History webinar. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Olivia Tuller, and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. And Marilyn let me know that she can answer questions throughout the presentation. So I'll let her know if you have a question in the middle of the presentation. So our next webinar is on August 22nd with Maureen Brady on Scottish Family History Research, Beyond the Basics. If you would like to access a previous webinar of ours, please visit our webinar index on our website or search it on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Marilyn Thomsen on military research, what and when. Before we begin, here's a little bit about Marilyn. Marilyn Thomsen, the editor of Utah Valley Technology and Genealogy Group newsletter, loves helping friends and family with their research. She graduated with a BA in Family History from Brigham Young University and completed her internship at the National Archive Branch in Atlanta, Georgia. Twice, she won BYU's award for her family histories. She volunteered at the Family Search Library in Salt Lake City and has been director at 3 family search centers in Utah. She completed training courses and served on the Lineage Research Committee for the Utah DAR. Her husband, Richard, shares with her a passion for digging up dead relatives and connecting them to living relatives. And we'll now turn the time over to Marilyn to share her screen if she's ready.
Okay, thank you so much. I am so delighted to be here and I am so grateful to have this opportunity. It's fun as you start to prepare because I've been doing this for 30 years and it's amazing the changes that occur, even say pre-COVID when I last taught a class on military records. My presentation, the title about when and where. The when is when are records being created for your military ancestor, and where should you hunt to find them? And I'm going to be giving a lot of methodology and a lot of tips on how to do that. I know there's been some prior classes, really good classes here at BYU on kind of to define the records or give you examples of records and that. And so my focus is more the how-to or hands-on and where to go. There is a handout that Olivia is made available for you. I don't know if that's in the chat or Olivia. So the handout is...
Yes, I'll put it in the chat right now. Thank you for reminding me.
Put it in the chat right now that you can access. So we're going to start out with a story. When I first started doing family history, they said, okay, the best way to do military research is to find from your family, if you can, where they served, what unit they served in, and which war they were in. And so I thought I had the perfect example. This is Hezekiah Hunt. Okay, so this screen is shows Hezekiah Hunt, and the story is he was buried in his uniform, that the cane that he carried had a sword in it, and the picture of the little cabin there is the cabin where my great-grandmother ran out in the back in the forest behind, and they buried their goods so that those Yanks couldn't come down and steal them and rob them. And then you'll see a picture there of his headstone, and in the front there's a cross, a Confederate cross, that means that he was a soldier, and behind it you can see a little Confederate flag flying in that cemetery. My problem is that I went to BYU and I went through all their checklists on how to do military research, and I could not find a single record on Hezekiah Hunt. Then I went up to the Family History Library in Salt Lake and spent a week of research, and they couldn't find any records on Hezekiah Hunt. And then I went in and did the deeds, and I found out that this little cabin he had lost before the Civil War. The family story was that those carpetbaggers came down and they tried to force him to sign an oath of loyalty to the United States, and he refused, and therefore they took away his land. And I found out, well, the land was gone before the Civil War. So I'm saying, Mom, I can't find any records. So I did my BYU internship in Georgia at the National Archive branch there. And the same thing, I went in with Hezekiah Hunt, and he's lived in Georgia, and please help me find his records, and zero. So then right next door through the parking lot is the Georgia State Archive. And I walked in there and I said, can you help me find Hezekiah Hunt? And they said, they reached under the desk and pulled out a binder, and they said, oh, yeah, Hezekiah Hunt. He died in 1882, and his wife's name was Debbie. I said, yes, 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 yes. And they said, oh, well, here's Debbie's pension. And she got her pension in 1901. I said, what? She got a pension? See, he was born 1810, so he would have been 91 years old when she was getting her pension, and he had been dead for, almost 20-something years before she got her pension. So the first rule I had to learn is the national records are national records. State records are state records. County records are county records. And people serve in all levels of the military. And usually what happened, starting, for example, even back in the colonial times, throughout all the times, is people would join up the local militia or that local guard. And then they would morph into the state if the state needed them. And then if the colonial line needed them, then they were, that group was then sent over to help them. And so the records can be in any three of those levels. The other thing I learned from that is that you need to expand the window of when you're searching, because you're looking here. Here is Debbie, and she had a beautiful pension application, and she said, yeah, my husband served in the Home Guard, and he was 54 when he signed up. And she said, and I'm blind from cataracts, and I really could use the help from the pension. And that's the next lesson we have about military records. I help with the Daughters of the American Revolution, people complete an application, and the stories that are in them are incredible. And I love the stories that you find in the military records that connect you to these people. So they have abundant information, and especially pre-1850 census, there is information you cannot find anywhere else. For example, if I was to look at a lineage and I see full dates and of birth and full places of birth, I say there's got to be a military pension, because that's not on the headstone. They didn't have obituaries. And families didn't keep those kind of records. Often they were illiterate. And so it's either a Bible record or it's military records. So you need to do it. And then the other thing is wars. Lots of wars, lots and lots of wars. And even though not everybody served in the military, even if they were the right age and those ages. So for example, the Civil War have some of these ancestors that were 10 years old when they joined the Confederates. And as you saw, Hezekiah Hunt was 54. And so that's a long, long gap of to look. And then even if they didn't serve, so for example, Debbie, she didn't serve, but her information was in the military pension. And the other thing is that there are other records, draft records. Maybe they signed an affidavit for a pension. And I remember one that says, my brother, he did serve. I went up, and he and my other brother were serving up there, and my other brother, and I went, oh my goodness, this is a whole family pedigree that by a woman who never served in the military, and it was in someone else's application. There are people who gave supplies. There are Lineage organization, and so you need to be able to search all of these to be able to get it. Another thing to remember is that military records exist outside of the wars. And so even then, people have military records. They may die, they may have graves, they may work for the military. And so do not just narrow it down to the wars, but the wars are a great place to start. Okay, so if this little chart is in the handout, and it shows you how to go back to your pedigree. I love the fan charts that they have available in Family Search and now Ancestry and that. As what I do is I start going across the fan chart from one side to the other and see when they lived. And if they lived during this time period, then I make a little chart and say, okay, this is the war. I can look for records. This is a sample of a chart, possible ancestors. It has their name, has when they were born, had when they died, had what their age would be, what am I looking for, and then what years their children were born. Another clue to see if your ancestors were in the military is if there is a gap in children's ages, you say, oh, could it be that he was off fighting in the war? And that's why there is a larger than normal gap. The second chart that I'm showing now is, this was James, and now this is for his brothers. And so we have to remember that my brother's father is my father's father. My cousin's grandfather is my grandfather. My nephew's father is my father's brother. My uncle's father is, and so forth. I remember I was trying to prove a pedigree, and it says, Hezekiah Hunt willed this slave to his sister-in-law, Melissa. Well, Melissa was a child in a census, whereas my grandmother had already married and was out of the home and wasn't in the census, but the sister-in-law was. So I kept thinking, well, I know who the sister-in-law's father is, but how can I find my grandmother's father? And then it hit me. Oh, okay, this is the way. So the key to military records is to find the name of the company and the regiment of service, okay? And so as we told about Hezekiah Hunt, I didn't have that piece of information that just opened up everything. Opened up that he'd signed a loyalty pledge. It opened up that he had been in a census, draft census. It opened up so many records because I had that piece of information. So these are places that you can locate the regiment. Family records, county histories, websites. There are some really good websites, and I'm going to point those out. And then this reports of Adjutant General, that was where I kept poking into, and he wasn't there. But sometimes that's where a good place to start, because it's just a master list. So this is how to find a county history. Okay. County histories are especially critical for the first wars, the colonial wars. Colonial wars is before the American Revolution. Very critical for the American Revolution, because those people gathered up into these county histories records. And you don't need to keep beating the bush, because they will have put them into the county county records. So this is the Internet Archive. It's kind of my favorite place to start. I go here even before Family Search books and before I go to Ancestry books. And the reason is their viewer is just so friendly, and I can do it in my pajamas. So as you can see here, I just put in Tolliver County, Georgia, and I didn't even put history or anything like that, and it popped right up. Okay, so then you click on it, you say, oh yeah, I want to check this out. On the screen, you can see in the table of contents, they have a roster of militiamen in 1827 in Georgia. So let me explain. Everyone was expected to serve in the military if you were a man of the right age. And those ages changed. And so you need to find out. There's a lot of websites, a lot of places that will have the ages at different times. And then it becomes an almost complete list of all of the men in that county. And so you can see in this one, it says the first county census. And that is because in Georgia, they lost the first 3 censuses. And the first census in this county was 1830. And so they count this roster of militiamen. And it's what they would do is the militiamen were expected to show up. They would run some drills. They would find out who can shoot, who knows artillery. They would make their officers and they would group them together. And then they would have a drill and they would do this a couple times a year. And then the people would go home. And so this roster of militiamen is really one of the first records for those early ones, okay? This one also is in that county history. It shows you, it explains about who and when. It has a drawing of militia district. So one of the problems you're going to run into is you're going to have people with the same name. I mean, if your grandfather was John Hancock, you definitely want to name one of your sons John Hancock. But when you have 36 John Hancocks in the same county, you're going to try to separate them out and define which John Hancock is yours. And so this little map helps you to know which of the John Hancocks is yours. And I have a friend who was trying to join the DAR, and her John Hancock was one on one end, and the one that was already a member of the DAR was on the other. And so she had to prove they were 2 different men with the same name. Up at the top, it explains here that women and slaves were counted in the militiamen roster. And you're going, what? And then it goes on to explain, but some of the people counting put the women as slaves in, and some of them didn't. And so just really pay attention. And just because it says roster of militiamen, pay attention to this. And this is in a county history. Okay, this isn't state, this isn't federal. This is a census that won't be in another county, for example. Also in Georgia, there was land, is what they did is they had a big scandal. And so they said, because the rich guys in the legislature were giving out this land, and they said, no, we're going to absolve anything. And so we're going to give everyone a lot to draw in the lottery. But we're going to give revolutionary soldiers an extra drawing. And if you're a soldier in the Indian War, you're going to get an extra drawing. And if you're an orphan of a soldier in the Indian Wars, you're going to get an extra drawing. Now, let me explain. Orphan means that your father is dead, but maybe your mother is still living. So just understand that's the term of orphan in the records. So this was really important because when you see a person's name and see that they're a widow of a Revolutionary War soldier, or they were a Revolutionary War soldier, that is an important clue to you about them. Another thing is there are draft records, and these ancestors may not have served. They may have been recipients of pensions. So, for example, children of a military, or they may have done an affidavit. They get family benefits. They may be listed in lineage societies, okay? And so there's a lot of different people. And so when we start to classify records, when I served at NARA, they would stomp their feet when I would try to say, well, draft records. They say, draft records aren't military records. And I go, oh, okay. So you've got to get our phraseology right here. So there's pre-service records that even though we think of them as military records, they are pre-service records, and they're the draft. And then there's service records, and that's your muster roll and your pay receipts. So follow the money. Oh, the money is so important. And then there's post-service, so the pensions, the grave headstones, the lineage societies. And so as we talk, you're going to see these categories popping up again. So I told you about following the money. So this is the next thing. Even in the colonial wars, they had to pay the soldiers. And so this is a close-up of those receipts. So colonial wars, revolutionary wars, Indian wars, they had these pay stubs. And is what they were is they're like a check. And they could cash them in to use to pay their taxes. They could cash them in to pay for land. They really were like money. And so you see the whole, that actually is about the size of a silver dollar. And of course, it's covering up the information that you really wanted. But they are an important clue of where your ancestor is. It'll tell you where he is and where he served. And so you'll want to look for these. Again, these pay vouchers are more of a state or a county. And so you're not going to find these. So for example, Ancestry.com has been putting some of them up, but not all of them, because it's little clusters of them in the states and in the counties. So you want to start digging into those records to find them. So this is my favorite site. And the reason I love the site is two reasons. This site is organized by the wars, but if you go, for example, to Ancestry.com to learn about military records, they're going to feature their records. If you go to Family Search, they will feature their records and some other records, and you kind of get lost because it's a long list of records, and too often the links are dead. And I love the site because almost always, 99% of the time, I find that these links are accurate. And then the third thing that I absolutely love about this site is that it includes the state sites, the state archives, which are such an important source of where you go for records. So again, it's organized by the war, and then when you get into the war, then you'll scroll down and you can go down to your state. And again, the links are pretty accurate. Now, this is another good site to bookmark. This is Family Search. And again, it's organized by the wars, but some of the links don't work. So you want to go back to that Internet Archive, and you can use the Wayback Machine and get to the records. Or if you Google it, you'll probably find the link that it was linked to that has now gone. Also, another thing to pay attention to is there are indexes, and then there are the records, the images. Very rapidly, the images are coming online, and as they put the images online, they are creating new indexes. Often the new indexes have a higher level of accuracy than older indexes that were cards that could have been misfiled or misread or things like that. And so you need to be aware of that. Again, back to this thing about where. Family Search organizes their wiki with all of the important information about military records and that by location. So this is the website for military records for federal records. And that was one of my big errors. I went, military records is, oh yes, United States military. Yes, that's what I want. But then you have to know that there is state sites that have all these records, and the federal site doesn't link to the state site. So you need to get into the state military records, okay? And what often happened is the state would create, say, payroll records. And sometimes they would send them to national, and sometimes they didn't. And sometimes the national records got burned. And then you go to the county and or the state and you say, oh, they have a copy of this. And sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes the courthouse in your county or maybe the state records were burned or lost and they're in the national. And so sometimes it was, especially in the South didn't have, they are very suspicious of authority. And so often in the South, they would keep their records. But then also courthouses burned down. So this one is in Georgia military records. You'll see they have Georgia Confederate pension. So we put in the name, and here we bring up the widow of George W. Fallon. Okay, this is really good. This is a pension application, but this is an index. This is not the pension application. You want to go to the original, and that will not be at Family Search. It won't be on Ancestry.com. Where it's going to be is going to be in Georgia Virtual Vault. So these state archives are creating virtual vaults. Let me tell you, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do another virtual webinar, and that will be my total focus is the state archives, to just kind of go through them and help you to understand what kind of records you may be missing out on if you don't use those state archives, okay? So this is Georgia's virtual vault, and they are putting tons of pictures of people and places and locations and tons of records, early records, late records. And so these pensions are the county pensions that they have filmed, and they are available here, okay? So this is a service record, okay, that is there, okay? And so this is some of the information you will find by going to the original. I remember that George Washington Fallon. He died. He died at the very end of the war of typhoid fever. And his widow, Sarah, married the next door neighbor. And then he died. And so she married again. And so she actually filed for 2 different pensions under the 2 husbands. And the state archive gives you that information and tells you, you know, that Mrs. Moore also filed for a pension separately. And so those are the kind of clues that will not be in those indexes. This is another thing you'll find in there. This is an original roster of them signing up, and it gives more information about them. But what you also need to remember is that these military units were created by locality. So, for example, this Fallon, her brothers all joined with all their cousins and their relatives, and they marched down. And because some of the cousins lived in one county and some of them lived in Tarafello County, well, they went over the border and joined just across the border. But they joined all together, and then they all died together or were wounded together. And the whole Tulliver and Crawfordville, 80% of the men were killed in one battle, the Battle of Bull Run. And you can put an X right where they all died. And so that is something that you'll find in these records. Okay, so this is Richmond County. I'm just showing you on the side. If you're in Family Search, you don't have to scroll down. You can click on the military and it jumps right down to this page. And this is a list of the regiments for that county. And so that's a good place to start looking for. Remember, we're looking for the regiment so that we know where our family is. But also, You want the regimental history. You want to know who their captains were. The captains may have published a history. They may have had a drinking buddy organization that they have all these stories and they printed pictures. And so you want to know these companies, okay? This is the pictures. There were tons of photographers that followed the soldiers. And so we have an exact picture of where this unit died and where they were buried. There's pictures of, the crosses that they put up on the far left. That's what those sticks along there are, is where they buried soldiers. So that is something for you to think about. So this is the Soldier and Sailors database. And is what happened is the National Park Service got tons and tons of volunteers to gather up all the databases that listed all the soldiers in the Civil War. And they compiled also sailors, and they created some regimental histories. And they're not perfect, but so for example, I could go to the 49th Regiment and I can see the battles that they were in. That George Fallon that I mentioned before, it shows that this is the regiment, and then you could go to the regimental history. But also, there is a list. And so this one I just Googled, and Jen Webb has a list of everyone in the 49th Regiment. And you can see this is the name of all the cousins. This doctor is the name, Dr. A was his name, and he was 10 years old when he joined. And he joined with my Celia, this is her brother George, who died at the lookout of typhoid. And so these are the kind of things that you will find. Okay, so we've done the pre-service, and there were draft registration records. There were the militia rolls. We've talked about that. But I didn't mention that some people were excused from being on those rolls, and it could be because of occupation or health, or they have family dependent upon them. But most men were pressed into service in those colonial wars. The 1820 federal census had a special column for the men. It's called the military age. And when you do the census, you say, this is crazy. They've listed people here in the same age, men the same age twice. But that's what the reason or the purpose for that column in the census is, to see how many men they had to fight. Likewise, other states had a military census. In Georgia, they had a military census naming all males, and my Hezekiah is in there. It says he had a gun and he had a horse, and it gave his age. Connecticut had a preparedness, but it also lists the nurses that could go to war. And we have, the Civil War draft registration, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and Ancestries worked really hard to put those into one collection. But okay, there's a slide that is not coming up. Okay, service records, documents relating to when they were in the service, okay, during their tour of duty. So this is the middle one. This is the muster rolls. So what a muster is when they showed up, they got counted. Even if they were sick, they were counted. And they're also the pay receipts, okay? And they're just certain events that created these records. And they may not have all of these records, but you know that the service records will be there. So if they were in the Revolution, if they were even in Vietnam, they have service records, okay? And it'll include the listment, where they signed up, when they signed up, the equipment they were issued, the muster rolls, the payrolls, the leave, the casualty reports, if they were injured or sick, and if they were when they're discharged and when they died. So again, this is Georgia. We have the Confederate soldiers, okay. Family search or ancestry, both of them end up linking to fold 3's images, okay. And so this is what you'll see. When you see the service records, the first thing you want to do is you want them to put them in order, because they're not filmed in order by date. And that will give you a picture of what happened to them while they were in the service. Okay, I'm going to pull my, see if I can pull this a little closer. Maybe that will help you. Okay, so the government went through all of the records when they started needing to give them pensions and headstones and things like that. And so they created these cards, and they're called compiled record cards. And they actually are fairly large. Here they look like little teeny cards, but they're actually pretty big. And all of the information that came off of these records, and even maybe some exclamations, will be on these cards. So you want to look down at the bottom and see what information they have about the source of the information. And then you want to note the dates. Okay. So for example, this one, it says that he was sick in his quarters. Okay. And it says where he enlisted was in Crawfordville with all those cousins. And then it gives, this one is his death. So there's the date of his death. It was July the 9th of 1965. I mean, this is the end of the war. And then it shows that he died of typhoid fever. Okay. After this one, there may be another card that'll say, oh, the family picked up the pay, or so-and-so carried the pay, or took his horse home, or things like that. And so there'll be letters. For example, this letter that's responding to someone's query, they'll kind of give a summary of all those cards, and those are really helpful. Okay, you remember this bookmarked site? So this is a sample of the Revolutionary War. And these are the links that would be there on that. Okay, so and this is, if you were to scroll down and go to the state area, then this will say, oh, this is North Carolina. North Carolina Revolutionary soldiers have these records, and there's the pay vouchers. Here's the list of the soldiers from North and South, and then there's land warrants. Okay. Okay, so here's the pay voucher that you would find at the state, and that. This is the colonial records. They had no central government. So they were either British Army, which is actually housed in London. And so you'll have to go there, or else they were colonial militia records, which would be in the individual states. So North Carolina has an amazing archive, and you would go for colonial records to there. Okay. So again, you look at the muster rolls, follow the unit, follow the officer, and then you'll be able to find it. So in the Revolutionary War, they had two types. There were unit records and individual records. And this is what they would look like. Okay. All right, we're going to move on. So this is a card, and it lists all of the different records on the outside card that were going to be in the service records. And this has no value. It really doesn't help you, but it just tells you how their rank advancements went. Okay. But then this is the number of soldiers and officers in the company card. And over here we have the muster roll. Okay. The soldier cards had muster and payroll and it'll be filed by surname. One of the first problems you're going to run into is people with the same name. And so back to where. You're looking at where they enlisted and who they enlisted with and who is their captain. And that's how you separate out people who have the same name. Okay, I remember I had like 30 people with the same name. And I had to sort out the index cards to be able to see which one I'm going to look at. Okay. This is a Continental Line unit. So this is actually a federal record. It's not a, is what happened. This one says he was on guard. Okay. So also there were a lot of volunteer non-regular units. There will be riflemen or sharpshooters or artillery. And they were auxiliaries, okay? And again, they're going to be in the state and the counties, okay? And you want to go to those. Then we have our post-service records. Okay, so these are the records of the benefits that the veterans are going to get. and the documents relating to this individual after he's released. Okay, and the government still, people would say, hey, my dad wants a headstone. Oh, we need to prove he served in the military. So then they would have to get a certificate of proof, or if it's a pension. Also, the militiamen created groups and organizations. So again, you go to the state, you go to the county, you find out where these organizations are. One of the most important, well, there are pensions and burial, but land warrants. So what happened even in the colonial area, but mostly in the Revolutionary War through the Civil War, was land. Because they didn't have enough money to pay the soldiers, instead of giving them a pay, they would say, well, we're going to give you, if you'll sign up and serve for this long, we'll give you land. And in fact, Texas was willing to accept you if you were Confederate or if you were Union, didn't care where you served. They had tons and tons of land that need to be settled. And so that's really an important one. And soldiers could receive both federal benefits and state benefits. So you need to check them both. After the Civil War, the very first benefits, the pensions they got were for prosthetics. Legs and arms. And then, so it took them about 20 to 30 years before they finally said, oh, well, we can start giving out some money because we've had enough soldiers die and their widows need help. And that's when they started actually giving pensions. Okay. So that's why you have to look at the different legislations or the time periods. Also, burial records. And there have been, some really wonderful sites that track where people are buried of military, both for national and local cemeteries. And some of the local cemeteries have been rolled into the national sites. Okay. And then the other thing is soldiers' homes. If you can get a census that can show you where, then there will be the veterans. And these were really important for the Civil War veterans. And these you look for a locality, find out where they were when they died, and then you'll be able to find records actually for them. Okay, so the early pensions, land grants. So look when the pensions were first granted, and if they died before then you're going to look and see if they had a widow who would get that pension. If the widow dies, sometimes the children could apply for the pensions. Okay. And the pensions change. So you remember Dovey? She couldn't apply for his pension until after the 1900s, and because she had enough land that they wouldn't grant it to her. Okay. And the last Civil War pension was paid out in 1990s. So these pensions lasted for a long time. The bounty land warrants, the government provided this bounty lands in the Revolutionary War, and so on through 1855, okay? And the vets had to be entitled to benefits, so they had to take these steps. And so these are, first of all, they had an application, they had to prove service, they had to prove their age, they had to prove if it was a wife, their relationship. So this is family. These are your family records that you want to find, okay? So they would send out to the federal government or the state, and they would say, can you give me the soldier service? And then that would be sent to the pension department. And then the pension board would approve, or they would disapprove. And maybe the soldier would then have to gather up a bunch of affidavits that say, yes, I really did serve. These people swore on the Bible that I served. And so then they'll take another look and they'll go, oh, we just found another officer that was in that unit and his thing. So there'll be a list of people that were disapproved, and you have to watch because sometimes they were reapproved. Also, if they were deserted, they may not be approved. And so they could be in the disapproved file. Pension certificates would be issued and the person would be placed on the pension roll. And then when a new legislation came out, they would reapply to get more money. Okay. And then when he died, there would be a drop report, and that will tell you when they died. Okay, and then the wife would have to apply again for her support on her need, and then they would have to have a declaration. So in these pensions, I have seen a page from a family Bible. I've seen letters from ministers. I have seen just wonderful, wonderful affidavits that are in there. One of the most exciting records that has come out recently is the War of 1812 pensions. And they got up to be, maybe about half of the pensions. This is a huge collection, and then COVID hit, and they stopped down filming this. Fold 3, there was a lot of people that donated a ton of money to have this done. A lot of organizations that joined together, Family Search and Ancestry and genealogical societies. And so then they revved it back up, and then they have started. And as of August, they now have got 88%, okay, of these records that have been microfilmed. And these are incredible. They can be like 120 pages of documents. Fold 3, I keep wishing and hoping and waiting for it to be easier to use. The way it is organized, this is the general search page, is you have to look at where you're looking again, when and where. So you start out by putting which war and what the state is, and you put in the person's name, okay? And that's how you will find the different records. And this is a huge collection. The War of 1812 is free to everybody. And yet, when I go to different sites, it's kind of even Fold 3. When I try to bring up the widow's pensions for 1812, it doesn't bring it up. I don't know why. It's really hard. And so you'll want to go back to that site that I showed you that has the links, and that'll take you right in there to the War of 1812 pensions. And you do not have to, for the pensions, for those pensions and several other records, you don't have to have a membership. But there are other records that have to have a membership. And so you'll have to go in there. This is what a pension looks like. This is the declaration of service and tells where they served. This is a statement by a sister in the war. This one is talks about their son and names the son and how he died also. And so there are other pensions. Okay, we're moving right along.
So we have a question from the chat. Peter
Okay.
says, would
Yeah.
this US military research apply in a similar way to Swedish or Polish military research?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Let's have a whole class on Swedish military. Oh yes. Okay. So pay. They had to be paid. Okay. And they have to have a draft note, where they went and did a census of who was in it. Danish has the rolls where they counted all of the people of the right age for after the Napoleon Wars and that. And so you have the pay, you have, again, the same thing. You're looking at what the unit is that they served in. You're going in for service records. You're going in for benefits. You're looking for pay. Sometimes in the Scandinavian countries, they would actually end up with a military name because of the commonality of names in those countries. And so you need to find out what the name is that is in there and that. But yes, so this does apply, kind of the same concept. Pay, benefits, where are the records, start local, where is the local people when they mustered them up, and then if they go on to other units, and then you'll be able to look at the units and see where they served in their battles. Okay, did that answer it, I hope, Peter? Okay, we need to have a chat, I can see. Okay, wait a minute, I'm trying to get ahead. Okay. So these land, when they got the benefit of the land warrants, is what the warrant was, that they could find a piece of land that hadn't been anybody living on it. And then they would go and say, oh, I want to have this surveyed. Okay, I'm going to patent it. And so then they would get a patent on this piece of land, and then they would be granted. And so sometimes it was 80 acres, and sometimes it's 160 acres, and sometimes it's 300 acres, and some officers got 600 acres. Okay, and so, and different states had different rules. So again, you got to go back to the state, you got to find out what the rules and the laws were for the benefit of land. But this website is the Bureau of Land Management. They have a database that is so exciting. If your ancestor's living there, you want to go to this website and put in your ancestor's name, okay? And so like this is Alabama, and I put in Huckabee. And then this is what will come up. It has in order all of the applications for land, okay? And then if you click over on the left-hand side, if you click on that, then it's going to bring up documents. And this is an example of a document. This is Hannah Huckabee, the wife of Hope Huckabee. And he's deceased, and he was a private in Captain Stewart's company, 1st Regiment, Georgia Militia in the Creek War. The Creek Wars was the Indian removal through Georgia, the Trail of Tears. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. You just got a huge piece of information. And he died in that war, but boy, you got a piece of information that came from the benefit that she got. Okay, this is another example. This is a land warrant that was used to buy the land, Daniel Huckabee, private in Captain White's company. Okay, so use this website. Okay, let me see. This is some examples of pensions. They're hard to read. Okay. And so, but they're worthwhile. They're worth reading. Affidavits of witnesses. Sometimes they will be typed up because that, and so go through all of the pages until and see what is there before you sit down with that first page and try to read that horrible handwriting. Okay. All right. Soldiers are in census records. Okay. In 1880, it was really unique because all soldiers were listed in their home districts. And so in the military, let's say a soldier is serving up in Canada, they would still be listed, even though they're in Canada or in Tahiti or wherever they were, doesn't matter. The soldiers are listed in that census. That is one of the most important censuses we have. In the 1900, 1910, 1920 census, there was a special enumerations of personnel serving at military installations on ships and hospitals and overseas, which gives the company or troop or regiment or the resident at home. Make sure you check out those censuses for that information if that's the time period you're looking in. Congress needed a survey of veteran benefits to be able to allot the amount of money. And so in the 1840, 1890, and 1910, they had a special column that just identified veterans and pensioners, okay? So this is an example of 1841 in New Hampshire. This is a list of the veterans, okay, and their ages and where they are. Census of pensioners. This is Georgia, has the same thing, listing them. So as we know, not all of the census schedules survive. In 1890, there was a fire. They hosed it down, and then it started to go moldy, and so Congress says, burn it. And so they burned the 1890. There's a big gap in our records. However, there was a supplemental schedule that was housed in another building. And not all the states' schedules survived, but there were some that did survive. And they asked incredible questions. Were there Union, Confederate, rank, company, dates of enlistment, lengths of service? In Missouri, they have a schedule like this, and it asks questions about which war they served and who they served with in that. So, okay, compile service records. Let me see. Okay, so we've talked about pre-service. Okay, veterans organizations. That's where we need to be. So, these lineage societies are a wonderful place to go for information. Okay. I've listed a few here. Sons of the Republic of Texas. As we know, there were 6 different nations who were over Texas. Okay. Sons of the Confederacy. The 2 best online to use is the DAR and the SAR. Other organizations will collect stories of the unit and stories of people, and they are good. But the Daughters of the American Revolution shine. They have a database, and it's called the GRS, the General Records Society. And in there, they have an ancestor search. And so you go in, you put in the name, and their name, they kind of generalize the spelling. So try several spellings for the name. And then is what you'll do is it will tell you if they are in there and if there are problems or not and where they served and what their unit is. And then there'll be many applications. And as more applications come in, people have done more research and they've added more documents. And you can buy these documents, okay? You can order them. And so this is online. This is what you'll see. This will tell you the pedigree listing up to that individual. And that'll tell you which of the applications you want to order, because you would, even though it won't give you a death certificate for someone that recently died or anything like that, it will give you records tying these people together, well-documented records. So what you want are these applications. And so I'm just going to show you, this was one that I purchased and it was invaluable to me because it told me about records I didn't know existed. It told me about wills that I didn't know that existed. And then in the last page, it gave us a list of the children of this Revolutionary War officer. I had seen these names of these people in deeds, and I didn't know that they were related. And so it gives the names of the husbands. Okay, so like Celia and Fleet Fallon, that was my ancestor, but I didn't know that one of the daughters married the J. Parker. I didn't know there's a daughter married to a Mason, and so these are this is research and this is help that you can get these organizations. I have to say the Sons of the Revolution have come up, and their database is worth researching. And there are some recent videos about using the Sons of the Pioneers. And there are some research videos on records that they have. So the DAR has a huge library, and they have digitized books and books of indexes that'll tell you about, all of the people in the minutes and what page in the minute books or the court records of that your ancestors' records on. And the DAR has a huge collection of Bible records. The Sons of the American Revolution likewise have certain records that they have in their repository. And it is worthwhile to search their database, the online database that is here. And if you do that, you'll note that they have a biography. And that's one of the places they shine, is that they have created biographies, they have headstone photos and that. So going back, this is Ancestry.com military record page. I love Ancestry.com. Their digitization is good. They are linking into pedigrees is good, but they kind of focus in on what they have. And so that's why I like that other database that will take you right in to the records that are pertinent to that war, to that period, rather than this general search, okay? And sometimes getting the information out of Ancestry if you don't know it's there. Also, just mentioned there was Nara, the building burned. So World War II service records were burned. And so you kind of got to research and see what survived that. Okay, so I am done. All right. I can stop sharing. Do we have any questions, Olivia, that anyone have questions that they would like to have answered?
I think we had another question from Peter, who's kind of just a more personal question for you. He said, Yes, I greatly appreciate your help, Marilyn. How can I have a chat with you as I'm 18 hours ahead of you in New Zealand?
Oh, New Zealand! Ah, I love New Zealand. Oh, it is. I do watercolors, and some of the favorite watercolors I did were of New Zealand. Oh, we should chat. I like this. My email is Marilyn Thomsen at gmail.com, and I think that's on the handout underneath my name. Okay. And so send me an email and emails I receive, and we'll see if we can talk. This is the website that I had mentioned about more genealogical records and indexes that I like the links. So I've just brought that up as a larger view so you can see what they have. So this was the Revolutionary War. If we go back, this is the link of the War of 1812. This is the pensions and the service records, and see how these links go right into the site at Family Search. And so it is just so helpful to be able to not have to be poking around at Ancestry to be able to find it. And so you're just going right into the site to be able to open it up. Okay, so yeah, Peter had talked about Danish records. If I were to be, or not, Swedish records, wasn't it? Family Search. Okay, I don't know if this will let me write in or if I have to sign in. But Peter, one of the most important things for you to learn to use is the wiki, the research wiki at Family Search. And so when you come in here, you're going to put in Swedish military. And okay, and they even have it in Swedish if you want, but of course we have Google Translate. But they will bring up a military page. Okay. Oh, no. Swedish military search. Okay, Swedish. Let's just do Sweden. Sweden genealogy. Oh, here it is. Sweden military records. Okay. So we'll open up that page. All right. Okay, so you'll start out here on the far left side. Then they talk about the record types in Sweden that you would be using to use Swedish background. But over here, then it will then has a link that scrolls down to the different type of information. These are really well written, and they'll have little teeny mini pages that will have explanations written by professional researchers that are at the Family History Library in Salt Lake. And then they have a list of books that you will want to look for. They'll direct you to really good maps that will help you to locate the records at the parishes or the different levels. And so here, Swedish military records, regiments are listed alphabetically, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so my time's up, Olivia. I'm so sad.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, but thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you all. I wish you all the best of adventures ahead. Okay. All right. And I'm on there, August 29th, Maryland State Military Records. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you will join us for our next webinar, which is on August 22nd with Maureen Brady. She'll be giving a presentation on Scottish family history research, Beyond the Basics. A recording of this webinar will be made available next week. You can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any questions or comments, you can always email us at fh_webinars@byu.edu or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful week.